Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Now we deal with the concluding part of our escapade with metaethics, facing the question, as we see on the slide, why be moral? Now, the very question that why should one be moral is a deep question and is in fact perhaps the root of all metaethical questions. Now, let us explore. In fact, today's lecture is more of a thought exercise for you. This is a question of reflection and deeper analysis as to why should one be moral. Now, assuming that most of us would seriously answer that we would like to be moral or what ought to be moral, what is the justification of morality? Why should one be moral? That is the fundamental question of metaethics that is sought to be answered when we try to clarify the metaethical foundations of any ethical theory. Well, applied ethics talked about particular questions. It talks about questions like should I let my aging parents live with me and share my resources with them? Moral theory, which is a layer beneath applied ethics, talks about is utilitarianism a better theory or over deontological theories, that if the happiness of the greater number is being promoted by a certain decision, that should be taken. Now, beneath these two layers is the metaethical claim that what is it to be moral? And we explored various answers that explaining morality, and then the final question that we are left with is that even if there is something called morality, or if there is something called morality, why should one be moral? Now, let us look closely at the question. If I say why be moral, it can roughly be translated into two questions. It is why should I be moral, and the second question is why should people be moral. Now, this is seeking my justification to myself for being moral or for trying to be moral. This, on the other hand, is seeks a justification for the institution of morality. So, basically these the same question can be divided into two parts. Why should people be moral and why should I be moral? As an individual, I might have reasons to be moral, but why should morality be practiced? Why should one or the institution of morality be promoted? Now, let us think that what are the justifications? What are the justifications for my being moral, or what are the justifications for being for promoting this institution of morality? Let's serial number these two questions so that it gives us. Let's call this as question A and let's call this as question B. Now, the answer to A and B need not be the same. If my reasons for being moral, or I may have no reasons or justifications for being moral, but I may expect that the institution of morality continue for me to profit from it. So, the deeper, perhaps more foundational question is, why should people be moral? or why should the institution of morality be propagated. So, those of mischievous of us who would perhaps answer this question A in the negative, that well, I should not be moral, but as long as there are others who are moral, or there are the institution of morality is propagated, then there is an advantage in me not to be moral. So, a lot of questions being opened up. Let us tackle these questions serially, and these are answers proposed to these questions, and you are invited to grapple with these questions on your own, and as an assignment to answer this question, why be moral, because this is a question that has even been answered by Plato, that has been answered by generations to come, and that has been answered by generations that have come and will perhaps be tackled by generations that come. So, one has to reflect and delve into one's own theoretical foundations or psyche to understand or to explain give an answer to this question, because this question answered by you would reveal your theoretical framework or foundation to yourself. Now, let us say for a moment, if we do not take we club this question together and we say, well, why should I be moral? Now, let us think some of the reasons. Well, first, being moral is profitable. Now, many of us would perhaps agree or disagree that, well, being moral may not be as profitable as we would like to think it is. So, being moral does not always lead to profit. Being moral, so in fact, this wouldn't be a second answer to the question, rather it would be a first answer continued, that well, being moral is to conform to the expectations from us. So, as long as we are moral when the society, the collective, the family has certain expectations from us, and if to conform to those expectations, there is a kind of a pressure, and these expectations are moral expectations, and the pressure from us is to conform to it. So, we conform to it to be a conformist, as they say. Being moral because my parents, religion, tradition, or any such entity says so, and that I would be rewarded I would be eventually rewarded for the same. Now, being moral because my parents, my religion, my tradition says so, and that I would be eventually rewarded for the same. Now, this is and or punished for not doing so. Now, notice here, now all these three questions are all these three answers suggested are the variant of one of perhaps the same ethos of the answer, which is that being moral is being profitable, is being smart, is being wise, because well, to the conformist, well, it is conforming to tradition, it is conforming to the expectations that the collective has, that the family has. So, by conforming, my life becomes easier. So, therefore, I should be moral. The second option could be, well, as we said that, well, being moral is conforming to one's religion and is following the diktats of one's religion or one's tradition or one's parents, with the impression that, well, following or being moral or following moral diktats is would get you rewards eventually, may not immediately, maybe eventually in this life or proposed afterlife, and not doing so would get you punishment. So, this is another customary level of morality where we talk about the justification of morality coming from the rewards it brings along or the fear of the punishment that it brings along. Now, apart from this, can there be any other justification morality? Before proceeding further, I would urge the viewers to reflect sharply on their own to find out, to explore whether there can be any other justification of morality. You are welcome to explore or deeply delve into any other justification of morality, and if you would like, please do email me your the answers that you propose. Well, there can be another justification of morality, because essentially, now what if you will take a look at these slides, these justifications essentially are non-moral justifications. Now, if I say that, well, if I look for, well, I am or as let us answer in the same strain, that being moral is simply the right thing to do. There can be, or more accurately, to ask for a reason for being moral is to ask for a non-moral justification. That is reducing the moral domain or more accurately explaining the moral domain in terms of the non-moral domain. So, this is the what I would propose as the second answer to the question, that, well, if I the very fact that when we ask the question why be moral is perhaps looking for a non-moral justification for the same. The question itself hides in it a prejudice or a bias towards a naturalistic understanding, that, well, one ought to be moral because simply it is the right thing to do. It is like this, that when we engage in an debate, we are engaging with a assumption that a rational resolution to the debate is possible. If I do not believe in the tenets of rationality or a resolution possibility, a possibility of a resolution, then my engaging in a debate is meaningless. Let us just quickly write it down to, suppose I engage in a debate. This assumes a resolution is possible and means of reasoning or argument or logic or rationality is agreed upon. by the debating teams. These assumptions, one engages in a debate having these assumptions would mean that, well, we can hope, or we can a resolution is possible, right. Conclusion may emerge and the entire plethora is a rational exercise. Now, if I get into a debate either questioning that, well, a resolution is not possible, that logic or rationality, the means of rationality and logic and argument, the standard axioms and principles of logic are also variable, then there is no point in engaging my debate. So, if I question the assumptions, then the exercise becomes futile. So, likewise, when I look for a, when I ask the question, why be moral, am I undermining morality? Well, the answer is, well, just the way, just as rationality is binding by itself, so is morality justifying itself. So, the second answer that we offered, that, well, if we need not seek further justification for the right thing to do, because as the adage goes that, well, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. That is the kind of a justification also offered for morality, that, well, what has to be done has to be done, that doing the right thing can have no other reason except that it is the right thing to do. Now, let us look at it this way. If we are in a dilemma, and from whatever metaethical foundation we have and whatever moral theory we practice, we arrive at something what we consider right. Now, the justification for doing that right thing, according to this second kind of answer that we just talked about, is that, well, it has to be done because it has to be done. Now, in a way, this is a non-consequentialist answer. In fact, this is in a way a resolution where doing the right thing is more important than anything else. Now, look at it this way. We can now let us think of an example where this would perhaps find a lot of utility. Now, let us say that if we have to unjustly trample over the rights of an individual to get the job done. If it is wrong, it is wrong and it should not be done no matter what. Now, this kind of a justification, let us put a concrete example to this. Let us say there is an examination conducted with a lot of an entrance examination, and one student was given a misprinted faulty question paper, which to the best of his ability he checked, and the question or the digits were somehow printed wrong, an error that he could not have spotted by himself unless he had access to another question paper. So, clearly this student has been wronged, that the examination has been unfair to him. But now, if the resolution is to conduct the whole examination once more, or to give him a separate examination, or to bring this let this matter out in the notice of the public gaze, harms the examination. So, if this matter is suppressed, the efficiency of the examination remains, nobody is disadvantaged, and lost. See, there can be very many variants of this example. Say the answer script of a student is lost, and it's simply not accounted, and he or she is regarded as not qualified. Now, this is an example where the right thing clearly is to accept the error on the part of the examination authority and make a resolution of it possible, whatever is possible. Maybe conduct the whole examination again, maybe hold a separate examination for the wronged person, or whatever the laws be. So, here the justification for the right thing to do is not that it would bring about the greatest happiness of the greatest number, because clearly in this case it would not bring about the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So, the justification for doing the right thing here is because it is the right thing to do, because it is the fair thing to do, and here fairness and rightness cannot be understood in terms of any other psychological or natural property. These are fundamental qualities or properties without any further reduction or explanation possible in terms of other natural properties. Now, let us go to the original question that we talked about, that the question B, that why should people be moral, or the justification of the institution of morality why not, as many philosophers have regarded as the fundamental question of ethics, that why not I appear to be moral to the collective or the rest of us, and covertly thereof work as per my desires. So, what essentially it is, why not just appear moral? Isn't there a deeper justification for the same? Now, a very common thing that we can associate with the stories we read, the news that we come across, the movies we watch, that in a standard plot of a movie, the bad guy wants to appear moral, because appearing moral gives you a lot of advantages. Let us say when he is framed as the politician or the businessman or the powerful tycoon, they want to be seen as moral by the people at large. They invest huge amounts or huge resources in what they would call as public relations thereof, to make their enterprise or themselves known as morally sound persons. But this is an appearance, and they would perhaps work towards their own towards the fulfillment of their own desires. This is a very simple plot which is perhaps seen everywhere, but this is a very foundational ethical question, that why should one be moral and why should one not appear to be moral, whereas gaining from the morality of others. The notion of free riders, that in a community of truth speakers, if I am a liar, I can get a lot of advantage. But in a community of liars, being a liar gives me no particular advantage. So, somewhere the moral platform has to exist for the free rider to benefit, because if the moral platform does not exist, then there is no free rider possible. So, this kind of a justification of morality, that there has to be the common adage that a majority of the people are law governed and rule governed, then it is that minority of rule breakers or law breakers that get an advantage. But if all collapses, then well, the rule breakers or the former rule breakers are as disadvantaged as anybody else. So, the fundamental question that arises is that, well, why should one really be moral instead of appearing to be moral? So, that means an internal intrinsic justification of morality that does not tackle any non-moral component. Okay, let's take a little flashback and let's think of let me many of you must have heard of this time when we of these earlier philosophers called Rousseau and Hobbes. Now, before I talk about these philosophers, let us put a fundamental question, a question that let's think for oneself. Let us say for a day, law enforcement, policemen are taken off the streets. What would people at large do? Let us say at the time of natural calamities, at the time of riots, at the time of civil disobedience, at the time of internal strife, when law enforcement ceases to exist, what would people do? Now, the answer to this question will largely determine what is our intuition or what is our opinion of the fundamental human nature. Now, if I see that, well, if I propose, if I assume that, well, the fundamental human nature is good, that when law enforcement is pulled off the streets, we find that, well, initially there may be a lot of chaos, but eventually people will start perhaps helping each other, and the majority of people would be moral, as to say. Now, this brings us to these two philosophers, Rousseau and Hobbes, that we talked about. Now, Rousseau said that, well, Hobbes was of the opinion, okay, let me briefly put, Hobbes was the opinion that, well, life in state of nature meaning without society, was nasty, poor, brutish and short, right. So, state of nature here it is nasty, but Rousseau on the other hand, well, proposes theory that we call an enter into contract. Well, we needn't go about the details of these two philosophers, but what we need to say is that, well, Rousseau says that, well, society as an institution comes as a pact between the individuals to form a society where there would be regulations, voluntarily imposed and accepted and followed regulations, enforced regulations for the betterment of all. So, in the say a time of natural calamity or riot, now if a group of people living together come into an contract that, well, each one of us would not harm the other and we would protect each other from any other external aggression, if because the law enforcement at that time doesn't wouldn't be able to do so, and this is the formation of the society. That, well, there is nothing intrinsically perhaps right or wrong, and but for each one of us to pursue our desires, we need a minimum platform of security, and that security would be provided by the social contract, as Rousseau has talked about. It's popularly, if any of you interested to know more, can search this term social contract to get further details of Rousseau's theory. So, now let us so Rousseau is another way, another the Rousseau society is another justification of morality, where he says that, well, what one does or the formation of morality or society is to restrain each one of us equally, so that all of us can have moderately fulfill most of our wishes instead of leaving it as a total free rein. So, this is another example of morality as a social construct, as analogically speaking, that well, when we all come to play a game, we follow by common rules, so that all of us can enjoy the game, because winning does not mean that we are allowed to break the rules, because that would take the fun out of the game, and that would perhaps make it brutal and equally insecure for all. So, to bring a level of security. Now, this would perhaps be the prevalent, many of us would follow this as the foundation of metaethics, that the reason for being moral is to get one's own security to act further. So, with this I leave the question to you, that well, why should one be moral, or why should morality be propagated? This is a justification that has been sought. Why does morality have to be followed? Because it is enforced, or is it binding onto us just as the way rationality is? The way we say that, well, if there are 3 oranges with me, I can always take 2 oranges out from them. I cannot take 4 oranges out from them. Now, just as this taking 4 oranges out of 3 oranges is absurd to us, does morality have the same kind of binding? That well, knowing the right thing and doing the right thing is compelling onto us similarly. So, there have been all moral theories proposed and systems built have been answered to this fundamental question, that well, why should one be moral, and why should the institution of morality be promulgated or propagated? Now, this is a question I leave you with to reflect and think for yourself, that what is your justification of morality that you come up with.